Today we're going to talk about what happens next amid Trump's indictment and the rest of the GOP screwing themselves in response to it. I interview Congressman Jamie Raskin about his cancer treatment, his response to the Republican crazies on the Oversight Committee, and his reaction to the prospect of a Trump indictment for the events of January 6th. And I'm joined by former press secretary and MSNBC host Jen Psaki to discuss Trump's indictment in Manhattan, her thoughts on the Dominion lawsuit against Fox, and how the transition to a new cable show has been. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen, and you're watching No Lie. So as you know, Donald Trump has officially been criminally indicted in New York, making him the first former president to now have the title of criminal defendant. So first of all, there are a lot of questions about what happens next. As of this recording, Trump hasn't yet turned himself in. Preparations are reportedly taking place between the Manhattan DA's office and Trump's lawyers in the Secret Service. He'll have to be fingerprinted and booked. There will be a mugshot. It's not a requirement that it be released, but it's customary that it is. So I certainly anticipate that we'll see it, and I also anticipate that it will be the most famous mugshot in the history of the world. Get ready for 100 million mugs and t-shirts to be sold in the 10 minutes after that photo gets released. Trump will reportedly then be arraigned on Tuesday of this week, where he'll stand before a judge who will read off the charges to him, unless that's waived by his lawyer. The judge will then set a status hearing date, which will be the next court date in this case. It'll be at a subsequent status hearing that will actually get a trial date, which could come somewhere between 6 months and a year out. With that said, it may be sooner, it may be after. This is all speculation at this point. As for Trump, he'll almost certainly be released immediately. It's unsure as to whether prosecutors will ask for some type of limited gag order, given the fact that Trump has a tendency to summon murderous mobs of people. But again, that's something that we'll find out pretty soon. And of course, that's all notwithstanding other potential indictments being handed down in Fulton County, Georgia, in the New York Attorney General's case, and at the DOJ for both the classified documents case and the January 6th case. And by the way, if you're wondering what happens if he gets indicted in 2 or more different jurisdictions, normally the way that it would work is that the first jurisdiction to charge him would have priority. I say normally because nothing about this is normal, so I don't know what's ultimately going to end up happening here. Now, Trump responded to the news pretty much exactly how you would imagine. He started attacking District Attorney Alvin Bragg's wife on Truth Social. He posted some unhinged screed where he whined about being indicated because spelling is hard. And look, that was all expected, right? I don't think anyone imagined that Trump would do what he should be doing, which is exercising his right to remain silent. So that was no surprise. But what was something of a surprise was how the rest of the Republican Party reacted. Immediately, a bunch of Republicans obediently spoke out in Trump's defense. Jim Banks, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Kevin McCarthy, Jim Jordan, basically the entirety of right-wing media. They threatened retribution, mobs, violence, civil war, said it was open season for conservative DAs to charge Democratic politicians. And here's why I say that this is surprising. Republicans were so close to getting rid of Trump. All they had to do was let him get indicted for his own criminal behavior and then allow the party to move on. And I'm certainly not here to help Republicans win any elections, but I would imagine that any rational human being would look at the fact that Trump led to the biggest Democratic House margin in modern American history in 2018, then Democrats winning the White House and both chambers of Congress in 2020, and then Democrats gaining in the Senate and only barely losing the House in what should have been a massive red wave year in 2022, as evidence that maybe the GOP under Trump's leadership isn't going to win many elections. In fact, in this past midterm cycle, it was almost exclusively Trump's endorsed candidates who lost while other Republicans actually overperformed. You couldn't ask for clearer proof that Trumpism specifically is just straight electoral poison. And yet, for these Republicans to have an out, a legitimate out, and instead run right back into the burning building just defies logic. And look, none of this is to say that a Trump nomination is a guaranteed loss for Republicans in 2024 because he did it once. But let's not pretend that he's going into this election with any wind at his back. After not only overseeing losses in 2018, 2020, and 2022, but then possibly contending with at least one, but maybe multiple criminal indictments. Maybe you can make the argument that this will bolster support among Trump's diehard fans because, their fortunes live and die on his. But on no planet will a soft R or an independent or some disaffected Democrat look at a guy contending with a criminal indictment or possibly a convicted felon and think, yeah, no, that's my guy. This dude definitely deserves a promotion. And I get why it might seem like that's the case right now, considering the whole right-wing media ecosystem is dominated by extremists like Tucker Carlson, who called Trump's indictment worse than January 6th, and Lindsey Graham, who is literally on the verge of tears, begging viewers to send money to Trump, as if Trump, a billionaire, needs people's cash. But out in the real world, when you're not dealing with white nationalist adjacent propagandists and Republican politicians who've taken up residence in Trump's colon, regular Americans do not view getting charged with crimes as a good thing. And I'd venture to guess that that theory even extends to plenty of Republican voters out there whose definition of law and order isn't elevating a criminal to the presidency. So if Republicans want to immerse themselves in their extreme bubbles and hitch their wagons yet again to the guy who's lost them elections in the last 3 cycles, who am I to stop them? But I should note that if there was any doubt that the foundation of that party is its most extreme elements, this should put that to rest. Here's a clip from my interview with Jamie Raskin. You know, you're going through treatment for cancer right now. How's that going? What are doctors saying? How much longer?
Well, the big picture is excellent news. The doctors are giving me a very favorable prognosis for defeating the lymphoma, the large grade B cell lymphoma, triple hit. So that's the headline news. But, I'm still slugging it out in the trenches with chemo, and it is no fun. I would not wish it on my worst enemies in the world. When Tucker Carlson came out with his propaganda reel about January 6th, there was a flood of death threats. I think I got 13 death threats the next day. And I was thinking about, how low do you have to go to send a death threat to some guy going through chemotherapy? But I thought, even those people sending me death threats, I would not wish this upon them. I mean, it is just no fun. And my heart goes out to all of my fellow chemo warriors across the country, because it is tough, and it's tough on the body, and it's tough on the mind, and it can cause neuropathy, which is like freezing, tingling numbness in your fingers and your toes. And so it's no fun. But in the big picture, we're living in a time where science has allowed us to defeat the dread disease, and that's an important thing.
And here's a clip from my interview with Jen Psaki. We have proof now that Fox is not a legitimate news organization. It is effectively a propaganda arm of the Republican Party. If you were still press secretary, could the argument be made not to call on them in the briefing room?
I wouldn't make that argument because it gives them more legitimacy and gives them more fire. I think the thing people should understand about the briefing room is that there are all sorts of characters in there who are not journalists, who have an agenda, who are their own versions of propagandists. And that is even more so in the State Department briefing room, where you have representatives of foreign governments. So I think, obviously, all of the texts and emails, it's not surprising, but it should be eye-opening to people about the fact that not just Tucker Carlson, but a range of people in Fox were not thinking about reporting accurate facts, but they were thinking about how to satisfy the desires of their audience to have alternative facts. That is the core problematic issue there. But to me, I just don't think that it's as easy as they shouldn't be called on in the briefing room. Nobody should do Fox, because in some ways you're taking yourselves off the playing field and you're giving them more fuel.
To check out those interviews in their entirety, click the thumbnails right here on the screen or check out the interviews playlist on my YouTube channel. You can also subscribe to my new Spanish channel by clicking the thumbnail on the screen. And finally, if you want to see the rest of my regular content, that subscribe button is on the screen as well.